And time for another coffee with Kilroy, or what I sometimes call beverage in a book. But this is no book. This is a magazine, or I should say a journal, a wargaming journal. This is War Diary number 24, and I believe this is the second installment in my subscription, subscription, easy for you to say. Let me have some coffee. A subscription that my son got for me, or won off of a YouTube contest by one of our very own or fellow content providers. So I want to thank my son, but also thank everybody who participated in that. This was part of the Mark Ruggio's awareness drive, and there was several of these that were given out, or several subscriptions. Some I think were on Ardwolf's Lair channel, and then I think this one was off of Mo's channel. So I want to thank everybody, including the publishers of War Diary. So let's get to War Diary. Enough of all that stuff. Let's have some coffee, relax, take it easy. You all need a break, and see what we have inside War Diary number 24. So we have a prelude here. Here's your table of contents. Looks like we got Telling a Better Story by David Hughes, Zero Leader by Arijo Velakanja. Man, I'm really butchering names today, aren't I? Let me have another more coffee. South Mountain, The Battlefield and the Games by John Southard. The Boers and the Bees. This is dealing with the British Army at Colenso, 1899, and Tanga, 1914, by Paul Coben. Blade and Bow, Taking a Stab at Ancient Combat. This is by Mike Nagel. And Jenkins' Ear by John D. Burt. So, interesting. Editor is Roy Matheson. Telling a Better Story. This is by David Hughes. This looks interesting here. How games can help understand history. And this, to me, I'm definitely going to read. I just unpacked this. I have not read this, have not looked at this magazine, this offering, this diary yet, or this journal. But this is a prime reason why I game. I've always, and mainly why I have a tendency to gravitate towards historical and more specifically military and war games. It's because to understand the history. You know, I play all kinds of hobby games, and actually have probably more hobby and Euro games than I have of any other offering. And those are for theme and for gameplay and mechanics. But, you know, war games and historical games are I'm very fond of and gravitate towards because of the history. I like the tactile feel of not only seeing the history, reading about the history, but playing the history and seeing how it plays out. I think I understand things a little bit better by doing that. And I'm a very visual person and hands-on type person when it comes to trying to learn. And so that's one reason I really like war games. And so this should be an interesting article to the extent that it explains my my preference. It's interesting. It's got some articles and got some examples in here as well. Even have some sidebars. Think like a wargamer. Interesting. Got 3 sidebars here. Here's the chronology of the battle. So let's see, what are we, we're dealing with a Napoleonic battle here. Let's see what battle we're dealing with. We're talking about the Peninsular War, at least at the top here, so I don't know if that's the battle that we're dealing with here. Talking about Portuguese line, so yeah, we're dealing with a Peninsular War battle here, it looks like. Anyway, all right, Blade and Bow storage system. Well, there's gonna be an article about Blade and Bow later in this magazine, or journal, I should say. Fortress Games article. Was fortunate enough to get a game from them. Want to thank them for that. The 20th Air Force, second edition. I've filmed a unboxing, but I need to get it to the table to play at least a few times before I talk about it. I usually like to do that before I start showing how, open up my mouth and, show how stupid I am. But these are the offering of their games look all very interesting. 8th and 20th use some of the same system, although they're different theaters. And then Save Afghanistan, Save Vietnam uses the same system, but again, different theaters. So looking forward to diving into those a little bit more. Zero Leader, here we go. Interesting. I wonder what this article's about, right? And I've done some coverage on that game, and thanks to DVG Games for sending that to me. And I've done some coverage. I need to do more on that. That is a very interesting game. Raises a couple of interesting aspects. Number one, it's solitaire and dealing with operations in the Pacific. That's and there's a Corsair leader that does with the American side. This is done the Japanese side. So the unique perspective of handling operations and managing those is it's not all about dogfights. It's about the logistics of the operations and managing the stress level of pilots. But also the other aspect that I think this raises is looking at from a different perspective, which again is a big part of my channel. But you're looking at from the Japanese perspective. You are playing the Japanese, and so you are attacking the Americans, and some people might have a problem with that. And you know what? That's okay. You don't have to play the game, but it does. And I've done when I covered this. I covered it. I had another, special where I talked about looking at it from the other side, or playing the enemy, so to speak. Right? There's I think that raises an interesting discussion on how we look at games and how we look at conflict. Somebody's got to play the other side, whatever that other side is, and so I find that interesting. I think that raises an interesting topic here. Love the imagery here of some of the planes in here, or some of the different features of the plane. And so this is basically a review of the game. So I like to read this. I don't think I've done a review on Zero Leader. I think I've just done some maybe unboxings and some maybe an after-action report. But my reviews I kind of put in explorations, where I talk a little bit more into the game itself. And I don't think I've done an exploration on that. But maybe after I read this article, that's going to prompt me to do that. South Mountain, the Battlefield and the Games Part 2. Yeah, this was in a previous edition of the journal, where they talked about South Mountain, and they looked at a lot of different games. And I think John Southard was who is a game designer himself, but talked about was the author of that as well, I believe. And I find these art interesting, because this is like bringing the games to life, right? I mean, you're kind of comparing it to what actually happened in the battlefields and talking about how the game simulates that. I found that I'm looking forward to the follow-up on that earlier article here. See some imagery here. And I have a section now on the battlefields, where I either talk about books on battlefields or going to the battlefields themselves. I have lucky enough to have a few around me, Civil War battle sites. But whenever I'm on the road, I try to catch up on one if I can, and I dump that in my Kilroy from the Road or my battlefield playlist down below. So this looks like a very interesting article. Habsburg Eclipse, love that game. I have the original Victory Point Games version of that. All right. The Boers and the Bees. Looking at two different conflicts here. This should be interesting. If you're interested in those conflicts, then it's kind of interesting. They're kind of going through maybe a little bit of a play-by-play here of sorts. That should be an interesting read. And Blade and Bow here. Oh, VUCA Sims. Yeah, I've gotten a couple of games, I think, from VUCA Simulations. Excellent games. High production value. Great look. And good gameplay. I'm not saying bad gameplay. I'm just by saying good, to great. I mean, their production value is really high level, and their gameplay is good. So anyway, Blade and Bow here. Talking about this game, I haven't read much about that game, but now that we have an article on it, that might get me into it a little bit. And this is part of the, I think this is affiliated with War Diary in that this is, they don't get a game when you get War Diary, but they do have some games that they also publish, and I think these are the 3 of the current ones right now. And you usually get, if you subscribe, you actually get a discount to these games. So that's kind of it's not quite a game with a magazine, but it's a down payment on a game with a magazine, maybe. Maybe that's the way to look at it. Jenkins Ear, here we go. Article on that. And then we've got another article for Lock and Load Publishing for Point Blank Winter Victory. And I've covered Point Blank, not the Winter Victory, but the original release of that. So, wow. So, quite a bit in here. And then what do we got on the back here? Abyss of Lament. What is this? Oh, this looks interesting. And it's from Legion Games. I've gotten some stuff from them, bought and they provided, so I appreciate them as well. This looks interesting. And we got 6 battles here, some pretty big ones here. Anyway, all right, so the decisive battles from the 7 Years' War, 56 to 63, and looking quickly at that list, I tend to agree those are some of the more decisive battles of that conflict. So there you have it. That is War Gaming Journal, or War Diary, War Gaming Journal number 24. That's my quick page through on that. Thank you for stopping by, sharing some coffee with me. If it's your coffee time, or tea time, or whatever time it is for you, I'm always happy that you were to stop by. Let me know what you think about this issue or the War Diary in general. Drop it in the comments down below. Love to hear from you. But I think this is a high-quality journal, and talking about history and wargaming. It's a nice combination of history and wargaming. And the articles, as you see there, have a blend. I mean, some other wargame magazines just talk about history and as a setup for a game that they might provide. Other journals or magazines might talk mainly about wargaming and just in general about the types of wargames. That goes back to the old, Avalon Hill General magazine back in the day, which was really supporting their games and talking about gaming, war games specifically. This one is kind of a blend. There's history in here, but there's also intermixed the games themselves and how those games bring out the history. That was the whole first article here. So I like this, and I like this approach. Anyway, that's what I have for you today. Thanks all for stopping by, and thanks. I appreciate this subscription. Take care, all. Thanks for watching.